This is episode 20 with Tai Lopez. Hi, my name is Mike Dillard, and this is Self-Made Man, the podcast for men who want to leave their mark on the world and create a legacy of honor, integrity, and achievement in every aspect of their lives. I'm glad you're here, and once again, it is time to forge your destiny. Welcome back to the show, everybody. Today's episode is brought to you by my friends over at Onnit.com. You know, whether it's increasing your levels of self-confidence, your energy throughout the day, or your ability to focus on the tasks at hand for hours at a time, the key to that success is always the same. It all comes down to the performance level of this machine that we call our body. And if you are looking for the best ways to increase your physical performance in all of these categories, Onnit.com is the place where guys like us go. And in fact, we have started an entire tribe of Onnit fans down here in Austin, and it would serve you well to join the crew. So head over to Onnit.com and try some of their Alpha Brain for focus. Try some Warrior Bars for clean energy throughout the day, which is what I use. Pick up some of their Primal Kettlebells for your house so that you can get away from the computer, get away from your desk, and get some exercise in. And when you do that on the checkout page, make sure you use the code SELFMADE, all one word, for a 10% discount off your entire order. Today, we are going to talk about ways to increase your productivity and motivation, which is something that all of us can use more of. And to do that, I've invited one of the smartest entrepreneurs that I've ever met to join us, Mr. Tai Lopez. Now, for those of you who are not familiar with Tai, he is, I believe, the single biggest student of life that I've ever met. For the past few years, he has committed himself to reading a book every single day, which has turned into the largest book club in the world with over 1.4 million followers and subscribers. He's a certified financial planner who's been mentored by Warren Buffett, and he hangs out with Elon Musk on the weekends, speaks at TED events, and is currently involved as a founder or advisor to more than $20 million businesses. And today, he is here to share some of his biggest secrets to success with you and I on the topic of productivity. And with that being said, please welcome Tai Lopez. Hey everybody, welcome back. Mike Dillard here. And today we have an amazing opportunity to talk to, I would say, is one of the smartest people on the planet, definitely the most well-read. And he's been someone that I've been following for many years now, Mr. Tai Lopez. Tai, how are you doing?
Great, Mike. Good talking to you again.
Absolutely, brother. We got a chance to meet up briefly in Utah at Eden Mountain about a month ago. It was awesome to see you and hear what you are up to these days. So that was a pleasure, and I wanted to thank you for taking the time to come on Self-Made Man today to share your wisdom specifically when it comes to productivity and motivation, which is something that you've been talking a lot about lately and reading a lot about lately. So I'm really excited to really hear your insight and words of wisdom on that topic.
Awesome. Well, I'm glad to talk to you. Always learn from you when I talk. And sure, I always tell people there's a good line in a book by Peter Drucker, one of my favorite books, called Managing Oneself. And I can't quote it verbatim, but he says something along the lines of, what separates Mozart, Beethoven, Einstein from the masses of people, it's not what we always think. It's not always that they just had this amazing IQ. He said what it is they knew how to manage themselves. And management, whether it be management of other people or management of yourself, it really falls into the same lines of, we got this 24 hours, and some people just, I think it was Thoreau, or, I said, you got to suck the marrow out of life. It's like some people suck the marrow out of that 24 hours a day and just live insanely productive and amazing lives. And then other people, we all have friends like that. It's like the same 24 hours and 5 years go by and you're not sure really what they've done with their life. And so that management of oneself, I think, is the differentiator.
So how have you been approaching that in your life lately? Because you are one of the busiest guys that I know, and yet at the same time, you find the time to, at least last time we talked, to read a book every single day. At least that's been your goal. And from what I've seen, you've been very successful at that. So what are the strategies that you've discovered and applied in your life?
So I think that it's a good question. I think I'm not a master at it. I wish I was like these Beethoven type people. but I think for me, it's in a process of experimentation. And so I'm continually experimenting, trying to crack the code. So I guess the best I could do is try to share my most recent experiments and what seems to be working. And I'll share what I've tried that doesn't work. Sometimes I think, Charlie Munger, Warren Buffett's business partner, says when you're not sure what to do, start in the negative. So start with all the things that don't work. It's like if you want to know who to marry, you can't find, a good girl or good guy. What you do is you start building a list of everything you don't want in somebody. And I think Sherlock Holmes said, when you cross off all the possibilities, whatever is left, no matter how crazy, that's the truth. So I think when it comes to motivating productivity, what I've tried that's just, number one that doesn't work for me, if I would list them out, is very precise ones. So like I'm going to wake up at 4, and from 4 to 4:15, I'll wash, brush my teeth, from 4:15 to 4:30. So I've done that whole thing. I've tried Pomodoro method. Some people might know that, where you set your timer and it's like there's different Pomodoros. Let's say I kind of did a modified one. It's like 20 minutes of work, 25 minutes of work, and 5 minutes then of rest. And then you go back and you do 3 cycles of that, and then you do a long rest. And that stuff, it might work for some people. It just doesn't work for me, because the reality of life is that we get thrown a whole bunch of stuff. You get emergencies, you get work, you get family. So that doesn't work. So I've tried that one, gone down that rabbit hole, been discouraged. And, if you're not careful, you'll just go, no schedule works, and you'll end up doing nothing. So then the second thing that doesn't work super well for me is kind of along the line of being super specific. The measurement tools that a lot of people like, whether it be I do like my fitness pal for food and dietary stuff. But there's different tools that people have, whether it be journaling and things like that. That doesn't seem to work. It works for some people. I think it's a personality type thing. When I try to use those self-measurement things to regulate myself, that doesn't work as well. Thirdly, I've tried the peer pressure ones where let's say you go, okay, I want to go to the gym more. So what I'll do is tell my friend, meet me at the gym every day at noon or something like that. That doesn't work as well for me, because then you end up, humans are smart. You figure out a way to break it once you break it once. And so I read a cool book on willpower, and one of the things it says is, they call this, the technical term is adherence. So when you don't have adherence to something, and you break it once or twice, it's very easy to spiral to never come back to it. And so what I concluded from these various experiments, those 1, 2, 3 things, tight schedules, measurement tools, and peer pressure, is that those didn't work for me. And the reason being is once I broke them once or twice, it became very easy to just break them again. And, there's a saying about that, I don't remember. It's something like, break it once, maybe you'll do it again, break it twice, and for sure you're done. You'll never get back to it. So what I found, after I excluded those 3 things, I started going, all right, what can I adhere to? That's the key word. It's like diet. It's like if you need to lose weight, all the science says, pick a diet. The best diet is the one you'll stick to. If you want to go to the gym, the best gym schedule is the one you'll actually stick to. And what happens is, over time, your brain gets smarter, quote unquote, or more willpower, and then you can make a more strict schedule. But when you're starting out, especially, it sucks. So what really works for me amazingly well is what I call chunking. So I divide my day into chunks or regions or whatever, or ranges. So you basically have, let's say you wake up relatively early. Let's say you wake up at 5 in the morning normally. So you've got the early morning chunk, let's say that's 5 to 7 or 8. Then you have, the mid kind of morning one, the shift number 2. And then so on and so forth. Early afternoon, mid-afternoon, late afternoon, early evening. I only divide my day. I've tried where you divide up into like 8 different ones, but I divide my day basically into like 4 regions. So it's just waking up kind of early, getting myself together. Then I have that number 2 phase, which is generally about an hour or two after I wake up. And then I have the day phase, and then I have night phase. And so that's really simple. It's like 4 phases. So in the first phase, I don't try to accomplish much. Basically, I use the first phase of the day to monitor. So I wake up and I monitor stuff, whether it be, I have a lot of employees. So there might be, 100 people I need to check on. And obviously I don't check one-on-one, but I spend an hour. I check my social networks. I'm starting to do a lot more on social networks. I check my bank accounts. I check key, maybe I have CPAs and stuff that work for me. Check with them. So that, and then I also just wake up. So you eat, you maybe check your email. I don't check much email. I highly recommend you eliminate email as a form of communication as quickly as you can. So I use WhatsApp. We use some group stuff, a little bit of Skype. And then the most important thing is chunk number 2 of your day. This is the make or break for the productivity, in my experience, for the rest of your life. So if you become a master of chunk number 2 and chunk number 4, and I'll speak on that one second. So chunk number 2 is about anywhere from half an hour to 2 hours after you wake up. And this is when you must do the most important, hardest thing that you have. Whether it be, if you're writing, this is when you write. If you are firing people and you've been procrastinating, that's when you do that. If you're negotiating, if you're doing cold calls for sale, that's when you do that. And that's about a 3-hour period. And I picked 3 hours just because there's been a lot of science that that's kind of the maximum you can really, really, really focus. Like if you're learning the violin, that's the key time. If you're a pro basketball player, play for the Lakers, it's like 3 hours is about as much as you can really get out of people consistently. So you get 3. So let's say you wake up at 6. So around 6 to 8, you getting your life together. You check on monitoring. 8 o'clock comes. From 8 to 11 is like head down. Do not check your email. Don't just do. And I'll speak on this later about how I define what should be done there, because you can mess up. It's not necessarily the hardest labor. It's not like, you need to dig ditches. So you dig a lot of ditches from 8 to 11. There's a parameter that I use. Then the third phase of the day, which for me is like, let's say noon to 6 o'clock, that is still where I'm doing some work, but I'm doing much more stuff. Like that's when I would schedule meetings with people. That's what I would sit in on a conference. That's when I would, let's say, go around and come up with new ideas, like take some brainstorming time. So that's that third phase is kind of like I'm already relaxing a little bit more. Let's say when noon comes, noon to 6. And then the last phase is super important. And this one, I can tell you, I've never heard anybody talk about this much when it comes to productivity. But I think if you don't get this last phase, number 4 down, the whole thing falls apart. So I have a scientist in my company, the chief scientist. He's a molecular neurobiologist. So we try to build these things around science. And so I was talking to him about the brain. And, the way the brain works, it's very much, you and I are all under the control of a drug dealer. It's not a drug dealer selling crack or heroin on the side of the street. It's the drug dealer of the brain. And the brain controls us with testosterone, adrenaline, serotonin, norepinephrine, all these things. And one of the most powerful, without a doubt, is the dopamine response. And I see this everywhere. I talk sometimes on this concept of the 25 cognitive biases. These are what make humans decide things. So there's about 25 ways. If you want to be more persuasive, you want to do better in sales and marketing, you have to understand these 25 cognitive biases. And some of them are complicated. You have senescence bias and, Kantian fairness and all of these kind of association, availability, blah, 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 these more complicated ones. But the most simple bias that drives us all is reward bias. And Charlie Munger says, every year of my life, I think I've understood the role of the reward bias in human behavior. And he says, but every year I look back at the year before and realize I underestimated it. Now he's about 91 or 92. So he said for 60 years, I've known about reward bias, but I always underestimate it. And so taking, I can talk more on that in detail, but the last chunk of your day, this fourth chunk, you must reward yourself, and you got to reward yourself daily. And this, especially when you're starting out, if you're already a monster of productivity, you're already Mozart, you're already, Bill Gates and Richard Branson, you may not need this. But for mere mortals like all of us who haven't achieved that status yet, if you reward yourself every day, it's easy for your brain to do some short-term pain. So let's say from 8 in the morning to 11, you're going to do some stuff that you need to do. It'll make you money, but it's a pain in the ass. As long as your brain knows dopamine is going to be released by 6 p.m., because at 6 p.m. you're going to do what you perceive as a high dopamine reward. So let's say, and it can be very simple. I find most of them should be social, because I'm an extrovert. If you're an introvert, it might be, this is when you paint a painting. Might be when you take your kids and you go to the park and you walk. If you're an extrovert, this might be you go out with your friends. I think a happy median, I'm not totally an extrovert or introvert. This is when you go to the movies, you go to a comedy club. And so what I call this is shortening the loop. Most people's reward loop, they'll go, okay, I hit this goal, and in 3 months, every quarter, I'll reward myself with a trip to this and a trip to that. Well, that sounds good on paper, but once you understand that the brain, just imagine experiments on mice. So Herman, Dr. Fresco, who works for me, he did a lot of experiments on mice. Now, he did humane ones for anybody listening, so these aren't, torture ones. These are just like, mice going around their life and him observing them somewhat with a little bit of control. And he said, if you did an experiment with a mouse that every time it did a certain thing, maybe go on a wheel real fast, and then it steps off and it touches a little button, and it gets a little reward of some food that it likes. He said if that reward didn't instantly get given after the mouse walked on the treadmill, and it was like a month later it would be delivered, he said the whole experiment would fail. The mouse's brain would not be able to have prolonged gratification. And so even though we're obviously not mice and we have the ability to have more prolonged, more delayed gratification, we're not as advanced as, the more you learn about people, one of my mentors used to say, the more I learn about people, the more I like my Pekingese dog. And so it's a little bit like that. Like the more you learn about people, it's like, well, we may not be animals in a certain sense, but we're not too far away. Mm-hmm. So this is kind of my long answer to your short question.
Well, no, I'm sitting here thinking to myself, like, holy smokes, you're basically describing my days. And obviously I didn't approach this with any kind of, I'll say conscious intentionality, based on a book that I read or a strategy. But essentially that describes how I run my day. First hour is just kind of getting ready and relaxed and dressed and the whole thing, and going through, social media or email or whatever it may be. And then, typically from 9 to 11, 12 o'clock, I sit down and, I'm creating my products. I'm working on my business. I'm doing something on the creative side that I need to get done. Whatever's going to move the needle in the biggest leverage fashion for me is what I do. Come, 2 o'clock, 1 o'clock, till 6, it's scattered things, if you will, going to the gym, running errands if I have any errands to run, phone calls, that kind of stuff. And then come 6 o'clock, my brain's toast and I want to go do something that I perceive as a reward. And that's basically my daily routine, which is fascinating because that's not what I expected to, for you to describe. And one of the other pieces that I thought was interesting when you first started talking about this and how you had failed using a few different strategies, I've come to the conclusion that clearly we are not all built the same as people, and that the best strategy out there is the one that's designed to fit how you're wired. And so for me, I absolutely run away from structure and putting myself into timed boxes. So like you described the 25 minutes on, 25 minutes off thing, I was like, there's no way. I the most that I do is put a meeting in my calendar, and that's as far as I'll go as putting structure in my life is concerned. And so that clearly did not work for me as well. And so, that is pretty cool. I like how it's broken down into four chunks, if you will. And that's exactly what I've been using as well. So
Yeah, and I think I agree. I mean, you're a sharp guy, and a lot of times when I talk to sharp people who are very productive, we that's how I kind of confirm these theories. I start meeting people, and they go, "Yeah, I don't do exactly like you, Ty, but I get the kind of the gist." I think there's that saying. I can't remember if it's Dostoevsky or Tolstoy. It's something like, all unhappy families be in a different way, and all happy families are happy in the same way. Meaning, the path to failure, there's like a million ways you could fail, but there's only a few general vicinity. You've got to be in the right vicinity to do things productively in this case. And I do think, I'm actually working, we're trademarking a new personality typing system. There's the Myers-Briggs and the DISC system and all that. And I've come up with a personality typing system that we're kind of developing it. In that personality typing system, there's 4 main archetypes of personalities. Each of us have them in different degrees. And so in the system, there's PASE. It's called PACE. And P stands for practical, A for action, S for social, and E for emotional. And so all of us have a little bit of each of those components. So you put the letters in order of your strength. So I'm what's called an APES. I'm a APES. So my dominant energy is action. So and I don't have time to explain this whole thing to type people, but if you were like me, and a lot of entrepreneurs, probably a lot of your listeners are A's, because A's get sick of routine, quit their job, and go off and start doing something on their own. If you're an A, you're probably going to be like me and you, where you go, I'm not doing well when I have every minute micromanaged. And so, but if you're a P, practical people really look forward to planning, to laying out the day. So for sure, if you're listening to this and it doesn't resonate with you, the main thing I would say to take away, kind of the next step, you must be a master of cycling. So these short cycles, like if I look back at my life and go, Ty, if you wanted to do more with your life, what would you have done? And there's so many answers you see to this on podcasts and videos asking this question. And for me, it's easy. It's the most powerful innovation in human history is not what people think. It wasn't the light bulb. It wasn't, the car. It was the scientific method, the way to approach things you don't know. And so whenever you ask, how could you have lived a better life? You don't know. Nobody knows. I mean, I could adjust 10 things, but the scientific method, which is the 7 steps. So when it comes to productivity, you've got to go, I don't know the answer, what's exactly perfect for me. So I'm going to follow the 7 steps. And the 7 steps are, ask a question. So the first question you ask yourself in this case, how can I squeeze more life out of my 24 hours that I've been given? Number 2, and this is the phase people really forget, research. And that's, people ask me like, Ty, we see these Lamborghinis and books and all that stuff. Are you showing off? And I tell them, I'm like, listen, I had Ferraris well before. I had Ferrari for 5 years and never posted a picture. I was reading books for a long time. The only reason I post all this stuff is because people ask me a lot, what in the world, what's your approach? And mine is you got to read a lot. And there's a good book, The Self-Made Billionaire Effect, where they studied self-made billionaires. And the number one way that billionaires around the world in different industries do this number 2 of the scientific, which is research. How do they come up with these ideas to test? Is reading. It's pretty simple. You can listen to audiobooks too. So that's number 2. You ask yourself a question, how to be more productive. You listen to podcasts like this, you follow. Then number 3 is you formulate a hypothesis. And this is hard for people. In the Myers-Briggs, they divide people into 16 categories. And one of the parameters is whether you're a P or a J. So a P is a perceiver and a J is a judger. And if you're about half the world's a perceiver, perceivers don't like to make decisions. So they like kind of sit back and they go, well, it seems like there's so many different ways I could motivate myself. Let me just get more information. And they're always like researching, but never concluding. So step number 3 in the scientific method, you have to conclude. You have to go, all right, based on my research about my question, I'm just going to go with this hypothesis that the best thing I can do is regulate every 5 minutes of my day. And you run with it, you own it. And then you get into, step 4, which is you run the test. And what happens is most people don't ever perceive things as tests. For example, one of my favorite books I've read in the last year is a book called Diet Cults. And it's a journalist who compares the average diet to a religious cult. And he says, bring up religion or diet at a dinner party, and you're going to get the same type of wacky, I love my idea. And it's always the same thing. Diet is like, well, I was fat, then I switched to macrobiotic or vegan or paleo, and the next thing you know, I lost weight. Well, maybe it's just you change your lifestyle, but no, people are like, just like with religion, people are like, I know this is the truth. I know. And so what you want to do is avoid that mentality. I call it the black and white mentality. And so what you do on step number 4 is you just perceive it as a test. So if you're going to try Pomodoro method and every 20 minutes measure your day to be more productive, just see it as a test. And I think when I say short cycles, a lot of people be like, I'm going to be vegan for a year and see how it works. Well, you don't need a year. You got to do it longer than a day or longer than a week. I think that most cycles should be anywhere from 2 to 3 months is a good, and there's good science on, it takes about 67 days to change a habit in your brain. You need a certain length to get some statistical significance, so to speak. So you do that too, but then, the remaining 3 steps are the hard ones. So the 5th one is what people forget. And I had a friend who did this with a diet. He's actually a family member, and he was basically a pro athlete. And then he somewhere stumbled upon, so he was always asking the question, how can I be healthier? How can I be stronger? Then he stumbled on his research. It wasn't really research. He just randomly bumped into a book on being a fruitarian. So instead of seeing it as a test, he saw it as like a cult. He's like, I am now a fruitarian. I remember he was at my house, and this is a dude that was strong. He was a fighter and a boxer and MMA guy, just about at the pro level, semi-pro. So, ripped and six-pack and not a dude you want to brawl with. And my family was probably the strongest guy. And all of a sudden, he does this, not a test. It was full-blown, I've changed my diet religion to fruitarian.
Bought into a sales pitch, basically.
Yeah, he's like that. He's a J. He loves to judge and go, that's what I'm doing. And I saw him a month later, and all of a sudden I noticed just a little bit, like his skin didn't look as good. He looked like he was getting a little skinnier. And so the 5th stage, which he was forgetting about, is once you run a test and you try something new, believe it or not, you have to say this and make it a step. You have to observe. People really forget to observe. They just go, no, I'm running out and into this and it's going to work. No, observe. And he forgot to observe. And then he forgot the 6th step, which is analyze. And the difference between observing and analyze is you got to crunch numbers. And math is the language of prosperity and wealth. Descartes, the famous philosopher, said he tried an thought experiment where anything he couldn't know for sure was true, he wouldn't believe. So he basically questioned his religion, his politics by going, is there a chance I'm wrong? And if there was even 1 iota chance he was wrong, he would drop it. And he said, the only thing I concluded at the end of my experiment you could know for sure was math. And, that was a long time. I think that was 1600s. And it's still true today. What my fruitarian family member forgot, you could tell his biceps were shrinking. You could tell, all of his body weight was changing. He was I'd say he was 6-7% body fat. And he started to be a little pudgy in certain places and then muscle loss. So he wasn't observing, which is just more casual, like look in a mirror, and he wasn't analyzing hard facts. And then the last step that all of us must do, and he forgot, the 7th step is you have to submit to peer review. So he never took the time to ask us and go, hey guys, I want to make sure I'm not being delusional here. I looked in the mirror, I measured my biceps. I don't seem to be, do I look like I'm getting healthier for you? Because everybody was like, you're falling apart in front of our eyes. And so when it comes to this being more productive, you got to go through that 7-step cycle, and you got to go through a lot of them. Thomas Edison died almost the richest man in the world. He started General Electric, which is the only company still in existence that was on the original stock market listing in the Dow Jones Industrials in the late 1800s. He built a monster of a company. At one point, it was the biggest company in the world in 2000. And he said on average, for him to get one patent, it took about 1,000 experiments. And most people just aren't tough enough. I tell people, they go, "Tai, how do I be more productive?" I go, "Well, tell me how many cycles you've gone through of testing." Most people, if they've even done one, I'll be impressed. I said, well, if it took Thomas Edison 1,000, and he was a pretty damn smart guy, how are you getting by on one? You know, I'm like, it's too cocky. You can't be cocky like that. You can't go. I need people that go, "Oh, I'm going to be a millionaire or billionaire." I say, "Oh, really? How long is it going to take you?" "I got this plan. It's going to take about 5 years." And I go, "Well, you do know Bill Gates took 19 years, right?" And he's got 155 IQ and a lot of things going and intense powers of focus. But you are so much smarter than him that you're going to not need to follow any of the rules. You're just going to work, 2 hours a week, 4 hours a week. When Elon Musk says he works 100 hours a week, and he again has 150 plus IQ, and he needs that many hours, but you don't. And so I find people, myself included, I get too cocky, and you got to follow the rules. And the best rule, not just for productivity, but for life, is to become like a Tesla, like a Thomas Edison, where you're short cycling through massive amounts of experiments in, let's say, 60, 70, maybe 90-day increments. You can knock out 3, 4, 5, 6 a year. If you do that for the rest of your life, you will, I strongly believe people would become like Thomas Edison. He died with 1,000 patents that on average took 1,000 experiments. That's 1 million experiments that he ran. Now, obviously, he had a big company behind him, but if you and I can just come up with, 1,000 in our lifetime, I believe that this is the key to the kingdom.
Agreed. Are there any shortcuts, or you might call them hacks, that you've discovered that you found you apply on a daily basis now that have really worked out well for you?
Well, so most of my hacks are mental hacks. A good hack that I've kind of come up with, and this will make you a hell of a lot more money. Understanding motivation. Okay. Motivation. So you have the 4 M's, I call it. And the more I master the 4 M's, these are the hacks. So going back even more elemental than everything I've been talking about, how to be more productive. None of this will work. You will not test. Okay? You will not experiment. You will not short cycle. You won't chunk up your day if you're not motivated. So even more at the root of this is motivation. And so one of the things I wish someone had left me with as a gift when I was 18, the school system, my parents, was how the hell do you motivate yourself to even divide your day up into 4 parts and even stick with it for more than a week? And I think the world lies to us and traumatizes us because it doesn't want to be honest about how humans motivate themselves. And to me, there's 4 M's. The first M is material things, and you must know yourself. The world right now is very anti-material things. In some ways, it's anti. In some ways, it's very Kardashian-like. It's kind of schizophrenic.
Yeah.
And so what happens is, you want to be non-materialistic. You want to give to charity and poor and others, but yet you're bombarded by stuff like modern pop culture or Kim Kardashian or whatever it is, which is very materialistic. So what happens is you can never truthfully just look yourself in the mirror and go, it's okay for me to motivate myself somewhat with material things. And by the way, 25% of people I bump into are very, very, very motivated by material things. 25% are somewhat, 25% are just a little, and 25% are turned off by material things. I mean, Mother Teresa, Gandhi, whatever, these people did not like material things. And so, but you got to know yourself. And if you happen to fall in the category of more motivated by material things, what you have to do is see your selfishness as also, or your materialism as also a way that you can use materialism to benefit the world better. So like Bill Gates, you could maybe call him materialistic. He's worth $72 billion. He held on to control. He has a 40 or 80 bedroom house, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Well, guess what? He's also the founder of the Gates Foundation, and maybe he's going to eliminate malaria and things like that. So who's more materialistic?
Right.
A person who won't admit it, or a person who just uses materialism to drive them to do bigger things. So that's the first step. Know yourself. Does that motivate you? If it does, you don't have to be greedy. You don't have to, build an empire, blah, blah, blah. Number two, you must understand that mating, that if you can motivate yourself, you'll not only get access to more material things, but you'll get access to better, romantic relationships. This is a controversial one, but without a doubt, it's true. Without a doubt, it's true. Brad Pitt,
No, I was going to say that's the driving factor for, I'd say, 90% of all males on the planet. So.
But usually for women, if you can't lose weight as a guy or woman, put a picture of your dream person up on the refrigerator and go, they want to date a healthy person. And every time you want to eat cake, no, they don't want. People are very selfish when it comes to mating or dating. They go, well, I want a healthy, happy, in shape person, but I want them to love me just for me. Well, do you love people just for them, or do you also care what they do, the habits that they embody?
Right. Yeah. Agreed. So people are, interestingly and ironically, I've found that most people are willing to do things and motivated to do things more for others than for themselves, which is an interesting piece of the puzzle, meaning that if I said, Tai, you can become financially free if you'll sit down, find the time to sit down every day whenever you want and make 300 cold calls a day to these offices and sell this widget. Most people, 9 out of 10, I'd say, would not do it. But if you put that person in the position of a job where they have a boss and now they're doing that for their boss because he asked them to, then they'll sit down and do it, even for much less money. So that's been an interesting observation that I've made over the years.
It's an interesting world we live in when you start stepping back and observing what the world's like. And you think, and you go, why didn't anybody tell us this stuff?
Yeah.
What's up with this world? It's like no one wanted to be honest. See, all these things take brutal honesty. A parent has to look at somebody and go, well, this is how the world seems to be. The world seems to go down this way, and I'm not saying it's fair, but I remember Calvin and Hobbes, the cartoon character, said he was saying something to his mom, and his mom said, well, the world's not always fair. And he said, yeah, but how come it's not never unfair to my advantage? That's what people really want. And so it's like when you go, well, people do care about what you're like physically and whether you take care of yourself. And they do care about that when it comes to quote unquote relationships.
Well, what's interesting, and I would love your take on this. Actually, I hate to put an event into an episode like this that will break it down by time, but I would really love to know your answer of this. So right now we're in the summer of 2016. We've got the Republican primary, election and debates going on right now, and there was a big author, James Altucher, about 2 weeks ago, put this big giant blog post up and on why he can't understand why people are voting for Donald Trump or why he's getting attention and how he's a clown and how he's going to disappear in 2 months. And regardless of your opinion of any of these candidates or political alliances, for me, it was very obvious, and I would love your take on this. But for me, I see the reason that Donald Trump is at the top of the polls and winning right now is that he's displaying all of the characteristics of an alpha male. And 99% of the world don't know what those are. They don't know how that works, and they don't understand that their decision-making process, and as you mentioned earlier, the drugs that are going through their brain are being determined by, 50,000 years of DNA and primal history that they're not even aware of that. And yet Trump is pushing those buttons and hitting those triggers and causing those drug releases, and that's why he's number one in the polls right now. So I would love your take on that.
Politics, not my number one area of expertise. I would say,
and I'd say it has nothing to do with politics. I'd say it has to do with human dynamics. So
I would agree that I have the sense that Donald Trump is less delusional than most people, and so people are just kind of what I was talking about. These 4 M's: the material, mating, mastery, momentum. The last 2 I'll talk about maybe later, but I feel like people are so delusional of those 4 and just delusional in life in general. When you get somebody like Donald Trump, who when they ask him stuff like, did you say this about women or something on Twitter? He's like, yeah, I said that about whatever her name, Rosie O'Donnell or something. Like, whereas a normal politician will just go, a normal politician will just try to change the subject. And I don't know if he can become president, because you do probably need some delusion to be a politician and really win, but he's able to be honest. So yeah, I'm sure an alpha male does that. He's just like, you're honest, you're not delusional. You call it, like, if history's been one way for a million years, you don't go, well, no, it's not that way, And so, yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens to Donald Trump. My gut feeling is he'll say one thing that actually, destroys his chances.
Right.
But it's a good ride, and I think it does show how eventually people go, come on, just tell me the truth. I always say it's like the government spending incredible amount of money on healthcare. I'm like, but what will your healthcare be if you feed kids soda in schools and junk food, and they say 50% of children in America in the next 10 or 20 years will be either diabetic or pre-diabetic? You need somebody who gets up and says, it's impossible to fix as long as you just cover up the system without going to the systemic problem and fixing it there. And I think Donald Trump might be that guy that'll try to say that. We'll see if the world is, if the world's ready for it. Your guess is as good as mine. There's been guys like that. Ross Perot was like that. The libertarian guy, what was his name? He was also from Texas. Ron Paul. So these people the world is so delusional that it'll listen to a non-delusional person for a while, but eventually it gets sick and wants its delusion again.
So let me try and pull us back out of this rabbit hole that I took us down, and on the subject of motivation and productivity. Speaking of delusion, speaking of mass media and distraction, I have to tell you that it's almost gotten to a level these days where, I don't even watch television, but I'm just on the internet working all day. I'll pull up Facebook, whatever it may be. It's almost unbearable to even participate in an online world these days because it scrambles your brain. Like you get mass love and affection from one post, mass anger and hysteria from another post, and it goes back and forth literally second by second as you scroll through your news feed on Facebook or Twitter. What is your take on that, and what are your personal habits when it comes to exposing yourself to outside stimulus, such as, well, frankly, the internet?
Yeah, whatever you do, don't look at the Facebook wall or feed for long. I check it like maybe once a month. News, somebody wants to tell me anything important, you'll be told by somebody else. Look at the news randomly. I don't like it. Like I said, I find what you want to do, and my biggest thing I've been working on, I'll have to come back and on a show one time and explain this. It's kind of a full other talk. But so how do you actually know what to pursue? Because, you got these 4 M's. By the way, the third one, people always will ask after, what are the other 2? The third one is mastery. It means humans are motivated by being good at stuff. So you got to know yourself. If that's an area of mastery, you got to go, okay, I'm going to do something I don't want to do because one day millions of people will go, that person changed my life with their mastery and their talent. And the last one is momentum. You got to keep momentum going. And so it's better. For example, they've proven this. Scientists have said, who's happier? Somebody who makes $1 million a year or somebody who makes 100,000? And they said, what matters is not what you think. What matters is what the income was the year before. So let's say somebody made 50,000 the year before, and this year they made 100. And the other person last year made 10 million, and this year only made 1 million. Guess who's happier? Mm-hmm. It's the person who went up. So our brain is very unsophisticated. It doesn't go, ooh, it's still better to make $1 million than 100 grand. It just goes, wait, I'm
90.
losing momentum. So yeah, so going back to this, after you know these 4 M's and this chunking and all this stuff that I'm talking about, it's a good question in terms of how do you interact with the outside world? Because the outside world, whether it's through the news or otherwise, will pull you back. And there's this old saying, one of my mentors used to tell me, Alan Nation said, Tai, when you're playing poker and you sit at the table after 30 minutes, you don't know who the sucker at the table is. You're the sucker. And so when it comes to media and it comes to interaction, when even dating, relationships, business partners, business deals, if you're sitting at the table and you haven't figured out who the sucker is, you're the sucker. And almost always when you watch the news, you're the sucker. They're selling your eyeballs. So they're going to deliver things that have high dopamine, high adrenaline, fear responses, so that the next thing you know, you are very driven to watch, keep watching. They're trying to hypnotize you because they want ratings, and they want ratings because they want money. So you're making other people's money in your life, and there's nothing wrong with making other people money as long as your life's improving. The things you and I should be focused on. That's why I like books more. Books are more well thought out cases. So let's say the news talks about global warming. Okay, journalists make 50 grand a year. They're not scientists. They've not spent 40 years. So they're going to summarize what they think you need to know. The better is to buy 2 books. One by somebody who says global warming is a huge problem, and one by the opposite side. Read both the books, listen to them on audio, read a summary of them. This is the way to know stuff. So you still want to be informed, but you want to be informed. People who are selling a book, sure, they're trying to sell you something, but they don't have the same, they're not selling you ratings per se. Now, sure, they might have a fancy cover on the book, try to elicit a response where you want to buy, but it's not the same thing. News people are trying to continually keep you hypnotized, with book people trying to sell a lot of books for the most part by writing one good book,
No, agreed. A book is the most asymmetrical, risk versus cost curve on the planet, where you can literally for $15 buy someone's 40 years of mastery.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable. So, I'd absolutely agree with you there. So, any last words of wisdom here, Tai, for those who are listening on how they can be more productive and really just increase the quality of their life and their levels of success?
Yeah, I'll leave you with this. This is one day we'll have another conversation on this, but the number one thing that I learned recently from one of my buddies who's an absolute genius. He has a PhD he worked at NASA in Berkeley, got his PhD, and he told me one time, he said, Tai, we're talking about figuring out what you want to do with your life and goals and being productive. And he said, so I have a PhD in something called multi-objective planning. So all of us feel like we got to juggle different things in our life. You got this, you got to be in shape, you got to make money, you got to keep your family, blah, blah, blah. And he said, interestingly, I have a PhD in that. And my conclusion after a decade of studying it is it's all bullshit. You can't do multi-objective planning. It doesn't work. And Confucius, thousands of years ago, said, the man who chases 2 rabbits catches none. And in a world of infinite ADD distractions, we're all wise to continually remind ourselves, whether it be Confucius or modern PhD, that you must focus. And then the question, whenever I bring that up to myself or others, they go, but Tai, that's not realistic. I can't just go, okay, I'm just going to be good at business because my family will fall apart or my social life. So then this is where I've concluded, and I'll leave you with this. When I park my cars in my garage, relatively wide cars and relatively narrow garage bays. And when I pull up, I used to look on both sides when I was pointing. I'd look at the left, make sure I'm not scraping, look on the right, and just alternate my head. So I was looking at like two objectives, the left side and the right side. Then what I realized is all you got to do is stay really close on the left side, my driver's side. I just look real close. And then I automatically will hit the goal or achieve the goal of not scraping the right side. So the real answer is not that you should have only one accomplishment you're trying to do, like just make money or just raise a family or just, be in shape. What you have to do is find the one goal that if you hit this one goal, it's like a domino and all the other goals kind of fall into place. So for me, that goal is knowledge. If I read a book a day, what happens? Well, I gain knowledge that cascades over into all areas of my life. Does that mean I only focus on reading a book a day? No. But it's one metric that I can optimize my life around. And then it seems like all those things start to fall in place. So for every person listening, it's not going to be read a book. It might be completely different. If you're Arnold Schwarzenegger, for example, I got to hang out with him the other day. Got invited to his little movie premiere, Maggie, and talked to him. And he said, for Arnold Schwarzenegger, all he had to do was stay in amazing shape and work out because he would have never been in the movies by his acting skill. It was his body that got him in, Terminator and blah, 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 Twins. And then he wouldn't have been politician had he not been an actor, but he wouldn't have been actor so it's the cascading domino effect. So you got to find yours. And I think most of us, we try to optimize too many things and you just literally, like Confucius, you end up with no rabbits. So pick one thing that when you hit it, it will cascade over into the 4 pillars of life: health, wealth, love, and happiness. So you got to find that one thing. For me, it's a book, but it won't be that for you. For you listening, you must find your one thing. And so there's a good book on the subject. It's actually about a guy that you were talking about, Keller Williams, real estate. He started it. His name is Gary Keller. He wrote a book called The One Thing. So check out that book on Amazon. I have a little list on my website, tailopez.com/books. It's a free list of the books I recommend people read. So you can check that out. And
perfect. And on that note, how would you like people to connect with you? Do you have a website? Would you like them to go to Twitter? Where can they hook up? And I know you've got a podcast that is you put out, I think, daily almost. All right, you're quite prolific in it. But where should people go?
Yeah, that's one central place. Speaking of just one thing, I'm all over the place, but social networks and podcasts and this. But TaiLopez.com, my personal website. When you go there, I've got something cool that we've been developing that for better, and people are loving it. It's a book of the day club. It's just a little email. Put in your email address, and we can do it every day, but 3 times a week, I'll give you the most cutting edge, quick tips from whatever books I'm reading. So a lot of people don't have time to read a book a day. I'll do it for you. It's free. It's now the biggest book club in the world. Now that Oprah's retired, she was the biggest. So TaiLopez.com. And then when you put it in there, it'll have links if you want to see my Twitter, Instagram, podcast. You can do it on YouTube and stuff like that. But TaiLopez.com, right there on the top of the page, a little place where you can get those book of the day reviews free. I was going to charge for them. I decided just ended up making them free. So.
Awesome. That sounds amazing. Thank you so much. And man, this has been a fascinating conversation, as they always are, filled with lots of good takeaways and nuggets, pearls of wisdom. I completely agree with you on your last bit of advice there, as far as, the one thing goes and finding your area of focus, because that is what happened to me 10 years ago and what I've really tried to hit home with, my students and audience, which is, find your one skill set, master one single skill, and that can be the platform that, cascades through the rest of your life, as you mentioned here a minute ago. So very, very true. So thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it, brother. Look forward to connecting with you again at some point in the future, whether it's here on the show or an in-person at an event somewhere.
Awesome, man. Thank you so much. Always awesome talking to you.
Thank you, Tai.